The possibility of a sharp, agile mind well into the later decades of life is not merely a stroke of genetic luck, but a tangible reality available to those who understand the biological architecture of the brain. Most individuals operate under the mistaken belief that cognitive decline is a natural, unavoidable consequence of the calendar turning another page, accepting brain fog and memory lapses as the price of admission for aging. This resignation creates a self-fulfilling prophecy where the body obeys the limited expectations of the mind, leading to a gradual dimming of the internal light that should burn brightest with experience. By rejecting this narrative of inevitable decay, one opens the door to a revitalized existence where mental clarity actually improves with time. The journey ahead reveals a specific, potent nutritional key that repairs the very structural integrity of thought, promising not just maintenance, but a genuine reawakening of the brain's dormant potential. The architecture of cognitive fluidity, the human brain relies on a vast, intricate network of cellular membranes to transmit the electrical signals that constitute a thought, a memory, or an instruction to the body. These membranes are not static barriers, but dynamic, fluid interfaces that require a constant supply of specific raw materials to maintain their flexibility and conductivity. When the body enters the phase of life beyond 50, the natural production of the essential lipid components that make up these cell walls begins to decline, leading to a hardening of the cellular structure. This rigidity acts much like a frayed wire in an electrical system, causing signals to slow down, misfire, or vanish entirely before they reach their destination. The specific nutrient required to reverse this hardening is a specialized form of fatty acid known as docosahexaenoic acid, or DHA, which serves as the primary building block for the cerebral cortex. Without a consistent influx of this vital compound, the brain is forced to construct its cells with inferior materials, resulting in the sluggishness and fog often attributed to age. Wayne Dyer often spoke of the body as the physical manifestation of the invisible spirit, a temple that must be honored to allow the highest form of intention to flow through it. From this perspective, the intake of high-quality neural nutrients is not merely a biological necessity, but a spiritual act of maintaining the vessel. When the cellular membranes are fluid and receptive, the gap between intention and action narrows, allowing the individual to move through the world with grace and purpose. The brain, when properly fueled, ceases to be an obstacle to the will and becomes a frictionless instrument of the mind. This biological coherence supports the higher faculties of creativity and intuition, proving that the physical and the non-physical are inextricably linked. A brain starved of its essential structural fats struggles to hold the frequency of higher thought, keeping the individual trapped in lower loops of survival and fatigue. The mechanism by which this nutrient operates involves the restoration of synaptic plasticity, the ability of the brain to form new connections and rewire itself in response to new information. In the absence of sufficient DHA, the receptors on the surface of neurons become deformed and less efficient at capturing neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin. This inefficiency is often misdiagnosed as a chemical imbalance requiring pharmaceutical intervention, when in reality, it is often a structural deficit requiring nutritional repair. By flooding the system with this essential lipid, the membranes regain their suppleness, allowing receptors to float freely and snap into the correct position to receive signals. This restoration of physical geometry at the microscopic level translates into the macroscopic experience of quicker recall, stabilized mood, and a renewed sense of intellectual curiosity. Many people assume that a standard healthy diet is sufficient to provide these specific cognitive building blocks. But modern agricultural and dietary practices have severely depleted the natural sources of these critical fats. The reliance on processed vegetable oils and grain-fed livestock has created a pro-inflammatory environment in the body that actively degrades existing neural structures. To counter this, one must deliberately seek out the pure, concentrated sources of this nutrient, effectively signaling to the body that the period of degeneration is over. This shift requires a conscious decision to prioritize the brain's needs over the convenience of modern eating habits. It is an act of reclaiming dominion over one's biology, proving that the body responds obediently to the commands issued by a mind that respects its own machinery. The restoration process is not instantaneous, as the brain requires time to replace the hardened lipids with the fresh, flexible ones provided by the new regimen. During this transition, the individual may notice subtle shifts before the major breakthrough occurs. A word found more easily, a complex problem solved with less friction, or a sustained period of focus that was previously impossible. These are the signs that the physical substrate of the mind is healing. It confirms the philosophy that the body is designed for wellness and will return to a state of balance the moment the interference is removed and the proper resources are provided. The secret is simply cooperating with the body's innate intelligence rather than fighting against its requirements. The reawakening of memory is particularly tied to the health of the hippocampus, the region of the brain responsible for cataloging and retrieving experiences. This area is highly sensitive to inflammation and oxidative stress, both of which are mitigated by the presence of adequate healthy fats in the bloodstream. As the inflammation subsides, the hippocampus is able to generate new neurons, a process known as neurogenesis that was once thought impossible in older adults. This regeneration proves that the brain is not a decaying artifact, but a renewing garden, provided it receives the water and nutrients it requires. The narrative of decline is rewritten by the biological reality of regeneration. This biochemical reality aligns seamlessly with the concept of being a no-limit person, where the individual refuses to be defined by statistical averages or societal expectations of aging. By optimizing the physical brain, the person removes the biological drag that often anchors the spirit to the mundane. The clarity that ensues is not just for solving puzzles or remembering names. It is for envisioning a future that is as expansive as the past was educational. The healthy brain becomes a launch pad for the second half of life, turning the years over 50 into a period of harvest rather than decline. In the practical application of everyday life, one often overlooks the profound connection between the quality of breath and the utilization of these nutrients, as oxygen is the catalyst that allows the brain to burn its fuel efficiently. Deep, intentional breathing acts as the pump that drives the nutrient-rich blood into the microcapillaries of the brain, ensuring that the expensive investments in nutrition actually reach their target. It is common for people to eat perfectly yet breathe shallowly, effectively starving the brain of the spark needed to ignite the fuel. Combining the intake of essential lipids with the practice of conscious breathing creates a synergistic effect that amplifies the benefits of both. Does my current lifestyle feed my potential or starve it? The ritual of conscious nourishment, the integration of this cognitive supernutrient into daily life, demands more than a casual addition to a list of supplements. It requires a ritualistic approach that acknowledges the profound transaction taking place between the environment and the body. Taking a concentrated form of DHA, whether through high-quality fish oil, algae oil, or specialized phospholipid complexes, should be viewed as a signal of self-worth. The timing of this intake matters, as the body's absorption rates fluctuate in accordance with circadian rhythms and the presence of other cofactors. Consuming these lipids alongside a meal containing other healthy fats triggers the release of bile salts, which emulsify the oil and ensure it passes through the intestinal wall rather than passing through the system unabsorbed. This practical detail marks the difference between expensive urine and genuine cellular repair. Dyer frequently emphasized that the energy with which one performs an act is just as important as the act itself. Swallowing a capsule with a mindset of fear, worrying about dementia or decline, imprints a frantic energy onto the biology, whereas consuming it with a sense of gratitude and expectation of health sets a completely different hormonal cascade in motion. The body eavesdrops on the mind's internal monologue. When the individual approaches their nutrition with the conviction that they are healing and strengthening their temple, the digestive system shifts from a sympathetic fight-or-flight state to a parasympathetic rest and digest state. This relaxation is crucial for the complex enzymatic breakdown required to transport fatty acids across the blood-brain barrier. The intent to thrive acts as a primer for the biological pump. Consistency emerges as the non-negotiable law of this process, as the replacement of cellular membranes is a gradual, cumulative endeavor rather than an overnight fix. The brain cells do not swap out their structural components all at once. It happens molecule by molecule over weeks and months. Missing a day or two interrupts the steady supply line needed for this reconstruction project. It is helpful to anchor the habit to an existing cornerstone of the day, such as the morning meal or the evening wind down, transforming the act into a non-negotiable pillar of the day. This discipline is not a chore, but a declaration of loyalty to one's own future self. A vital component often ignored is the reduction of competing substances that vie for the same absorption pathways. High intake of omega-6 fatty acids, found in abundance in processed seed oils and fried foods, floods the system with inflammatory signals that crowd out the beneficial omega-3s. The cellular receptors are agnostic. They will take up whatever lipid is most abundant in the bloodstream. Therefore, the strategy involves a two-pronged attack, aggressively increasing the intake of the secret nutrient while simultaneously starving the supply of its inflammatory competitors. This is the biological equivalent of clearing the weeds to let the garden grow. It is a choice to prioritize long-term clarity over momentary convenience. Hydration plays a supportive yet critical role in this protocol, as the electrical conductivity of the brain is dependent on a saline environment to facilitate the movement of ions across the newly flexible membranes. Water is the medium in which all these biochemical miracles occur. A dehydrated brain shrinks in volume and struggles to transport nutrients to the deep interior structures where memory resides. Coupling the lipid intake with adequate water consumption ensures that the transport highways of the circulatory system remain open and fluid. It is a simple adjustment that significantly amplifies the efficacy of the nutritional intervention. Midpoint payoff. A profound realization occurs when one understands that the gut and the brain are inextricably connected via the vagus nerve, forming a single information superhighway. The health of the digestive lining mirrors the health of the blood-brain barrier. The same nutrient that seals and heals the brain also repairs the gut lining, reducing systemic inflammation that often manifests as brain fog. By healing the gut with these essential fats, the individual inadvertently clears the mental haze, proving that clarity is a systemic phenomenon, not just a cranial one. This holistic synergy reveals that fixing the part inevitably heals the whole. There is a moment of pause where the individual realizes that the body has been waiting for this support all along. It is not fighting against age, it is fighting against malnutrition. Every meal presents a choice between feeding the disease of decline or fueling the engine of vitality. The conscious elector chooses foods rich in antioxidants, colorful berries, dark leafy greens, and cruciferous vegetables to act as bodyguard for the delicate fats being introduced. These antioxidants prevent the oxidation of the DHA within the body, ensuring it arrives at the brain cell in its pristine, active form. Without this protection, the beneficial fats can become rancid inside the body, becoming pro-inflammatory themselves. Thus, the nutritional strategy is an ecosystem of support, where each element protects and enhances the other. The transformation often begins with the return of vivid dreaming, a sign that the brain is engaging in deeper, more restorative cycles of sleep. This is followed by a stabilization of emotional reactions, where the individual finds themselves less reactive to stress and more capable of observing situations with detachment. These are the dividends of a well-structured brain. The internal environment becomes a safe harbor, allowing the personality to shine through without the distortion of fatigue or confusion. The over 50 experience shifts from a battle against entropy to a cultivation of wisdom. Am I engaging in my daily routine with the reverence of a ritual? The invisible barrier of stress, even with the most pristine diet and precise supplementation, there remains a formidable adversary that can neutralize these efforts: the corrosive chemistry of chronic stress. The body possesses a finite amount of resources, and when the alarm system of the fight-or-flight response is triggered, it prioritizes survival over repair. The hormone cortisol, released during states of anxiety and tension, acts as a solvent to the very neural connections the individual is trying to build. It inhibits the absorption of nutrients and actively shrinks the hippocampus, working in direct opposition to the goals of memory retention and cognitive expansion. Dyer identified these stress responses not as external impositions, but as erroneous zones, internal patterns of thought that keep the individual trapped in a loop of worry and defensiveness. The belief that stress is a natural reaction to the world is a misunderstanding of how perception works. It is not the event that causes the chemical cascade, but the judgment of the event. When a person over 50 clings to rigid expectations of how the world should be, they create a constant state of internal friction. This friction burns through the body's reserves of B vitamins and minerals, leaving the brain depleted and vulnerable. Reawakening the brain, therefore, requires a dismantling of the ego's need to control the uncontrollable. By surrendering the need to be right or to force outcomes, the biological system relaxes, allowing the parasympathetic nervous system to direct resources back toward digestion, absorption, and cerebral repair. The limitation of the nutrient-only approach lies in the failure to address the emotional climate of the body. A person can consume the highest quality DHA, but if their blood is thick with cortisol and adrenaline, the nutrient will not be utilized effectively. The cells close their doors in times of danger to protect their internal integrity. To unlock the full potential of the brain-boosting protocol, one must cultivate a practice of inner stillness. This is not merely a spiritual luxury, but a physiological mandate. Techniques such as meditation, deep breathing, or simply spending time in nature lower the cortisol baseline, effectively reopening the cellular gates to receive nourishment. Often, the resistance to adopting a calm mindset comes from a lifetime of conditioning that equates worry with caring or stress with productivity. This is a false equation. The most effective mind is a calm mind. A brain that is constantly scanning for threats is allocating its energy to the primitive amygdala rather than the advanced prefrontal cortex. To access the higher functions of memory, creativity, and complex problem solving, the alarm bells must be silenced. This requires a conscious decision to detach from the drama of the news cycle, the opinions of others, and the regrets of the past. It is an act of mental hygiene that is just as critical as physical hygiene. One frequent counterexample arises in individuals who eat poorly yet remain sharp, or those who eat perfectly yet suffer decline. This discrepancy often points to the power of the individual's dominant state of being. A person filled with passion, purpose, and love floods their body with dopamine and oxytocin, neurotransmitters that are highly neuroprotective. Conversely, a person eating a perfect diet but living in a state of resentment or loneliness creates a toxic internal bath that overrides the nutritional benefits. The biochemistry of emotion is potent. Therefore, the secret nutrient must be paired with the secret attitude of enthusiasm for life. The concept of wellness must expand to include the removal of toxic thoughts. Just as one would not ingest poison, one should not indulge in thoughts of inadequacy, fear, or judgment. These thoughts trigger the same inflammatory pathways as processed sugar. The discipline of monitoring one's internal dialogue is a key factor in longevity. When the mind is cleared of the debris of negativity, the brain is free to utilize its energy for regeneration. The biological and the psychological are two sides of the same coin. One cannot be polished while the other is tarnished. Ultimately, the barrier is often the story the individual tells themselves about who they are. If the identity is wrapped up in being old, tired, or past prime, the body will dutifully reflect that reality. Changing the narrative is the first step in changing the biology. The nutrient is the tool, but the belief is the builder. Without the builder's vision, the tools lie idle. What worry am I holding onto that axe as a wall against my own wellness? The ageless future, the convergence of high-quality structural nutrition and a liberated, intentional mindset creates a powerful synthesis that redefines what it means to age. The future ceases to be a terrifying slope into oblivion and transforms into a landscape of potential. When a brain is physically resilient, fortified by the essential lipids that maintain its intricate web of connections, and the mind is unburdened by the erroneous zones of fear and stress, the individual enters a state of flow. This is the state where memory is not just a repository of the past, but a dynamic library available for immediate access. The senior moment is replaced by the senior advantage, the ability to synthesize decades of pattern recognition with the speed of a well-oiled machine. Fulfilling the promise of vitality requires a commitment to this dual path of biological stewardship and spiritual alignment. It involves seeing the self not as a fading echo, but as a gathering force. The secret was never hidden. It was merely overlooked in a culture that seeks external cures for internal imbalances. By taking responsibility for the physical substrate of the mind, feeding it the DHA, the water, and the oxygen it craves, and simultaneously taking responsibility for the energy of the mind, choosing peace over conflict, purpose over resignation, the individual becomes the architect of their own longevity. The brain is responsive. It is listening to every bite consumed and every thought entertained. This journey is one of returning to the source, both chemically and spiritually. The ocean, the source of the golden lipid, offers the cure for the dry rigidity of age. The spirit, the source of intention, offers the cure for the rigidity of attitude. Merging these two forces creates a life that remains vibrant, curious, and deeply engaged with the world regardless of the chronological number. There is no biological law that mandates misery. There is only the law of cause and effect. By changing the causes, the nutrients, and the thoughts, the effects shift dramatically toward health. The vision of the future is one of a greenhouse mind, where new ideas are constantly sprouting and the harvest of wisdom is bountiful. It is a state where the individual is capable of learning a new language, mastering a new instrument, or guiding the next generation with clarity and strength. The limitations that once seemed solid dissolve when examined through the lens of proper care. The body is a miracle waiting to be supported. The brain is a universe waiting to be explored. As the narrative of the life unfolds, the realization dawns that the best years are not behind, but currently under construction. The tools are in hand. The knowledge is clear. The only remaining variable is the willingness to apply it with consistency and love. To live without limits is to feed the body what it needs to support a spirit that knows no bounds. Am I ready to inhabit a mind that grows sharper with every passing year?